Spiritual warfare. Practice non-reaction when confronted with a situation where you might instinctively react with destructive thoughts or action. For example, someone is insulting you. Take a mental step backward. Simply observe. Notice what thoughts and feelings pass in and out of your consciousness. Notice that you do not have to react destructively. In freedom, you can choose a more constructive reaction. Secondly, when there are bouts of frustration and a desire to control what is uncontrollable, pray and meditate on these words: God, not my will, but thy will be done. Enlist the aid from spiritual allies. Call upon the divine in times of battle to send you help. For it is written of old, He will give His angel charge over you to keep you in all your ways. The warrior who knows when to fight and when not to fight will take the victory. The warrior who understands how to deal with superior strength and inferiority in the development of force and resources will take the victory. The warrior whose purpose is to fulfill the divine will shall take the victory. The warrior who follows a fully prepared strategy when engaged in spiritual combat will take the victory. The warrior with sound decision making ability in the art of spiritual warfare will take the victory. If you know the enemy and yourself, you will never be at risk in 100 battles. If you do not know the enemy but know yourself, then you will sometimes win and sometimes lose. And if you know neither the enemy nor yourself, you will be at a risk in every battle. In a state of peaceful contemplation, ask yourself, what do I know to be true about my life? For instance, I myself know what when and I am loving, happier. When I am working too hard, I lose touch with my spirituality. When I have a tendency towards excess, can get me into trouble. Write down what you observe and determine how this knowledge can help you in your spiritual struggles. Begin the day with a quiet time of prayer and meditation, and in your prayers, ask only for the wisdom needed for this day. And in your meditation, only listen for answers. Note how this quiet time impacts your day. Procure some ancient texts of wisdom like the Bible or some other text and read only small portions each night before retiring. Read it with a desire to learn something from life. Note what it teaches you. Sit quietly and contemplate inner being. What motivates you and fills you with noble passion? Write a list of 5 good qualities with which you have been blessed, like benevolence, ability to listen well, consciousness. What do these qualities tell you about the special gift to the world? Once you have begun to discover your personal mission, it will grow and change. Write down a list of the inward barriers which inhibit you from achieving that mission. These are some of your spiritual enemies. Pledge to fight the good fight. Say to yourself, to your God, and to the world, today I will act without expectation. I will fight without aggression. I will call upon the higher power for my aid. I will confront the forces of darkness in my life and I will claim the victory. If your spiritual enemy seeks some advantage, entice him with it. Let him expose his true nature, for any destructive force within or without cannot be confronted until it is seen. Allow yourself to imagine acting on your desires, fear, lust, and rage. Imagine the effect of such an emotion, the finest stage, and the destructive nature. Exposing the true nature of all your destructive tendencies help you to defeat them, because you will see them for what they really are and how devastating they can become. For instance, if you are not aware of the destructive nature of your anger, how can you deal with it? If you cannot see your selfishness, how can you be sincere? If you cannot recognize your lust behind your love, how can you love purely? Expose your enemy, and when they are exposed, attack them. However, don't tackle some defect that you know is too powerful for you to overcome until you become well prepared to deal with it. The spiritual forces of destruction can truly devastate the strongest warrior, because the enemy is not wise and is often in disarray. If he is incensed, provoke him by jabs into this line. That is when we are forced and faced with laziness. Thrust yourself into action. When you are bolts of fear, go with confidence. And likewise, practice the opposite virtue for your vices. Which warrior walks more closely in the way? Which warrior has the clearest grasp of the spiritual climate and the earthly terrain? Which warrior has gained the greater wisdom through both victory and defeat? Which warrior shows more of the heart? Which warrior has mastered discipline and displays obedience to the principles and higher commands? Which warrior calls upon the higher forces for aid? Which warrior has better instruction and training in spiritual combat? Using these criteria, it is easier to see who will win and who will lose when confronted by the spiritual foe. Once you become accustomed to giving when one would always helping others, there are ways of learning discipline and control over oneself. Through such right actions come. It is very instinctive. It is not forced nor contrived, but it is genuine offering of oneself. Warriorship is a continual journey. To be a warrior, you need to be genuine. You need to be true to yourself in every moment of your life. That is the warrior discipline. In ancient times, the great warriors practiced the art of making themselves invincible. They waited for their enemies to expose their vulnerability. And when you are invincible, you can guarantee the vulnerability of a spiritual enemy. That is why it is very important to focus on the self, become strong in areas that you are weak, seek health where there is spiritual sickness, build up your moral and spiritual strengths which already exist. In this way, victory can be anticipated but cannot be forced. Becoming invincible is a matter of learning to defend oneself whenever the enemy comes up, rebel against your destructive impulses, discriminate the truth from the lies, ward off the influence of the dark forces. If one assumes a defensive posture, it is because the enemy's strength is overwhelming. If one launches the attack, it is because the spiritual enemy's strength is deficit. If you want to be an expert in the spiritual defense, remain firmly planted in the deepest recesses of the earth, becoming one with the ground, virtually invincible and unmovable, yet you are aware. You establish a position of inward strength which acts like a shield against all the attacks. This tactic is accomplished by learning the art of awareness and control. Master the studies of the inward terrain of the self through the practice of constant self awareness. The expert at defense moves with awareness across the terrain, observing the distance and the precision. Even when you're preoccupied with other matters, never forget to be aware of what you're doing in the present moment. Place in your imagination, you are giving yourself a buffer from simply accepting negativity to your life. You give yourself a chance to react rationally to your problem rather than impulsively. You exercise freedom and control, and this method of establishing yourself in the earth and becoming master of defense. For the master of the spiritual attack, on the other hand, tricks you with the highest reaches of the heaven. This warrior fights for the sake of what is higher, what is nobler, rather than the self. When the expert on the attack is able to protect the self, he can achieve victory. Whenever there is offensive spiritual aggression, then you have a series of sequential sections to be followed through with precision. There are several means of spiritual assault which must be put into place. The factors in the art of spiritual combat are always fivefold: self examination, assessment of one's spiritual condition, the solicitation of divine assistance, right action, and then finally victory. The earthly terrain gives rise to self examination. Self examination gives rise to assessment. Assessment gives rise to solicitation. Solicitation gives rise to right action. Right action gives rise to victory. And when the spiritual warrior discovers, through careful self scrutiny, a stronghold of the inward foe, and upon determining the exact nature of the situation, he calls for the divine aid in routing the enemy forces and then proceeds to attack, the victory will occur. This is spiritual combat. Once the master warrior has discovered the enemy, whether it be laziness or self-centeredness, desire or lust or hidden anger or resentment, the master warrior will assess how this particular enemy can be ejected from his or her life. For example, the warrior assesses the strength of, say, resentment. Can it be moved? What steps can he take to crush this enemy and replace it with maybe the counter virtues, that is, forgiveness and understanding? After having made such assessment, the master warrior will bring it into action. You need to consult the divine and take counsel, asking for specific help in dealing with the foe. The master knows that no spiritual enemy is removed without the divine assistance, and that roots of all anger and resentment can grow deeper if not we seek divine assistance. After soliciting such help, the warrior attacks. The attack comes by consciously changing one's behavior, letting go of resentment, praying for, receiving compassion for others, experiencing personal forgiveness and forgiveness of others. The battle continues sometimes for many years before the warrior finally recognizes progress is being made in slower steps. Victory is achieved only when the resentment or whatever the spiritual enemy may be has been vanquished and ejected from the life of the master warrior. Though this may seem like a paradox, lightning actions of this type of offensive campaign are non-actions. The choice not to follow through with destructive thoughts and desires, not to act impulsively from animal instinct, combined with the choice to act more courageously for the sake of something higher than the self, to act more from fulfillment and not bodily pleasures, are means of assault on the spiritual foe that is within. More often than not, non-action is action in the battle of the spirit. More often than not, non-aggression on the earthly terrain is full frontal assault on the forces of darkness in the spiritual realm. And this is because to stop doing evil, we need to not fight against the evil, but we need to confront it with a positive attitude. Therefore, the expert in spiritual battle takes a stand on the ground that is inaccessible and does not miss the chance to defeat an enemy. For this reason, the master warrior only enters battle after having first won the victory, while the defeated warrior only seeks victory after having first entered the fray. It is a matter of right disposition. This is a spiritual battle, not a physical one. To prepare oneself for confrontation with the inward foe, you have to have a plan of attack and to act upon it, to give every ounce of strength in order to defeat the enemy, all the while pleading for higher aid, that is God's assistance, panting for victory for no other reason than for the sake of spiritual peace. This is the mark of the champion. One who is practiced at achieving superiority over spiritual enemy creates opportunity for victory in this way and therefore avoids defeat. It is of no surprise, therefore, that the way of the ancient warrior includes basic principles of right disposition. With such a constitution, the spiritual warrior becomes able to repel the spiritual assaults and attacks the spiritual enemies at will, from inward discernment, integrity, and fortitude. Practice the following meditation. Find a safe and a quiet place where you will not be disturbed. Sit or lay down in a comfortable position. Practice emptying your mind of all the thoughts by not holding on to them as they float into your consciousness. Just watch them float in and out of the mind, allowing your mind to empty itself. Continue this process for at least half an hour. Repeat this process each day and notice the peace and the self-control you gain from it. Remember, this type of meditation is a discipline to be learned and practiced. The more you practice it, the more beneficial it will have the results on your life. Make a brief assessment of your spiritual condition. Set aside some time with pencil and paper to take a personal moral inventory of both your destructive and constructive tendencies, your negative and positive attributes, your spiritual strengths and weaknesses. Also consider what you would like to change about yourself. Be honest, be very fair with yourself during this process. What do you see and learn? This is for your personal benefit, not for others to evaluate you. If you feel you are ready, choose a destructive tendency with which you do battle. If this process is new to you, choose something which is very minor, a bad habit, a negative thought pattern, etc. Just examine strengths and vulnerabilities, noticing when and where it is the strongest, in what situation, where and when is it weaker. Discover and admit your part in allowing it to rule over you. First, acknowledge it, that you have allowed it to rule over you. Sincerely call upon the divine power, God, to rid this from your life. Consciously choose non-action in battling it. Do not act upon it. It will struggle to conquer you. But if you stand your ground in non-action, it will weaken and retreat. You will experience victory over that spiritual enemy. In spiritual battle, you need to define the enemy, refrain from it, and replace it. Although everyone must have some routines in order to maintain a familiar but peaceful existence, to follow the same routine without variation in a prescription for disaster, you become vulnerable to the enemy and open for attack. Therefore, practice the unordinary. Do something new in your strategy. Change your routine. Walk a different path than usual. Turn when you are least expected to turn. Pursue what you ordinarily would not pursue. Reach out for where you would never reach. This will keep the enemy in suspense about where you will go, and he is given no opportunity to study your weaknesses. This is called using unorthodox methods, that is putting you in a different path. Now, whether they are really demons looking to ambush you who can be outsmarted by unconventional warfare, or whether they are simply tricks our brain is playing because of our chemical secretions which are varying with time. This is called unorthodox method, really works. Give yourself permission to practice this. Follow the description of how to do this in the task at the end of the. See what a difference it can make. Not only will it help you give up against your bad tendency and find the demons, it will also invigorate you with creativity, give you lighter feeling, introduce you vast and colorful variety of delightful experience that life is ready to give you. Order and disorder are a matter of organization, one's mind and actions. Courage and cowardice are a matter of momentum in the heart of the spiritual warrior. Strength and weakness are again matter of spiritual disposition. Therefore, those who are skillful in spiritual battles seek the victory by organizing and dedicating themselves in such a way they are able to gain momentum through this against the spiritual enemy, thus moving into a position of vulnerability and then taking him into full force. The expert in spiritual combat seeks victory from strategic advantage and does not act impulsively with crude force. Expert is able to select appropriate action against a spiritual aggressor in order to exploit the strategic advantage. The one who exploits the strategic advantage brings full spiritual force into battle, like rolling boulders down a steep hill. Boulders naturally rest on flat ground, but on the steep ground they roll. Therefore, when strategically deploys inner forces against a spiritual adversary, it is like rolling boulders from a steep mountain. What can stand in their way? So make a spiritual to-do list and list the changes you would like to do in your life, the issues left undone, the challenges you know you need to face. Organize them according to their importance, with the most important one with the number one priority for action, rest following it. When you finish, examine the list. Is it accurate? Is it realistic? Redefine items which you call for more accurate description and remove those that are unrealistic. Determine how and when you will address the number one issues. Take action to address it. When you have made progress with this issue, move to the second, then to the third. Update your list regularly and be patient with yourself. You will never be able to clear the slate of issues. That is not the point. The point is to know your issue and to be able to take action that leads to spiritual growth. Experiment with unorthodoxy. Change your routine or notice the energy you receive from such changes. Have fun with this. For example, do your morning routine differently. Take a different route to work. Call someone you normally would not call and say hello. Try cooking some different meal you would normally not cook. Sleep in a different room for a night. Just for this day, avoid a situation which brings spiritual challenges. Respond to a loved one's communication with some illogical response and then smile. Break the mold of your life. Always believe in and take advantage of spiritual momentum. When things seem to be going very well, rejoice and continue in joy. Do not cut yourself short of joy. If you find the movement towards a better life, instead of stopping for fear of changing, take a few more steps in the right direction. Believe in the divine power which can work in your life and through you. Allow it to flow freely with an incredible healing force.